Steroids. Use. We work hard and play harder.
And that's just the goal with the Sharp Football Analysis podcast, is to discover and uncover new ways to analyze football, and then share that information and disseminate that material in an easy to understand manner. And then at that point, all you got to do is let the Marshawn Lynch principle take over. Yeah, that is, when we do it so constantly, so frequently, and so repetitively, and so accurately, even those who hate analytics, even the cynics and the skeptics, it just will click in their mind that they're so worn down and frustrated they will have to sit down and listen to reason. And that is the Marshawn Lynch principle. Because like he says,
if you just run through somebody's face, a lot of people ain't gonna be able to take that over and 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 over again. They just not gonna want that.
Think there's a deeper metaphor there?
Run through a face, then you don't have to worry about them no more.
So we are now joined by one of the most influential and respected professional sports bettors out in Las Vegas, who is actually participating in a tournament right now playing baccarat, and he's taking some time out to join us. This is Bill Krackman, Krackomberger. A lot of you guys who may be clients of mine know him. Otherwise, a lot of people out there who have heard him on other of my podcasts or elsewhere. He's actually been featured at a lot of different spots, but he is one of the few guys that you actually can asked to talk about some various topics, and of course Evan and I want to bring him on to go ahead and talk about some of the screen and some of the information. And a lot of you guys who are either playing daily fantasy or betting on these games, you look at the odds screen and you think that it's able to tell you something, and then you think that you look at it on a Tuesday or Wednesday and it's giving you the lines, and you see the direction the line might be headed, and you think that you understand what the sharp side is. And that's not always the case. And one of the first topics that we'll get into here with Crack is the manipulation that's involved. So you were talking to us just before we started recording, Crack, about that ability that you have to potentially manipulate lines. Go ahead and give some people information on that who maybe don't know exactly what we're talking about.
Well, first off, if anyone heard the introduction, anyone that's sharp and hears the word baccarat, that someone's gambling on baccarat, which is a negative EV game, they may say, well, why would I listen to this guy? This guy's playing baccarat. There's a lot of edge, and I don't blame him. I would. I'd probably hang up. I probably would turn the station off or turn your podcast off. But, I mean, there's more reasons than that. This is actually a positive thing for me. If I can give minimal play, or give the illusion that I'm playing to gain entry into a $200,000 tournament with a $100,000 first prize, I do it every single weekend. So, and that's what I try to do. I hang out with some influential people too. So you can just hang out with them and get good ratings. And there's ways to do it. Anyway, let's go into the reason why I'm here about line manipulation. Well, I've been saying this for years, especially in college basketball. College basketball, the key number in college size is number 2. Every sharp syndicate out there buys to the 2, every one of them. So if the line is minus 2.5 on a game, and they'll buy it to -2, -20. If the line is +2 or +1.5, they'll buy it to +2. So if you want to get to the 2, you don't ever want to be laying 1.5, taking 1.5 when you can take 2 for an extra 10 cents. The 2 is worth so much more than other numbers in the. As a matter of fact, like a guy like Alan Boston, who's won hundreds of units in college basketball. A couple of years ago, I was with him and he won 120 units. And we got unlucky that year. It's unbelievable, really, I swear. But he believes in buying to 2, 3, and 5. So that's also something. However, so think about this. I know I own it tomorrow, -2. Well, it's -2.5 at the key books out there, the key major books that the line is put up at, because there is no quote-unquote Vegas line. That's a bunch of crap. That's a crock. That's good for the newspapers, the public, and the people that want to read the Vegas line because of the neon lights, and they think, oh, my God, Vegas makes the line. Absolutely wrong. The line's made in Costa Rica. The line is made in, depending on what sport, either Costa Rica or, believe it or not, Jamaica. the Greek comes up with an original line on some sports also. But usually Chris, CRIS, or Pinnacle also will come up. But usually Pinnacle's been copying in the last couple of years. 15 years ago, Pinnacle was coming up with the line. That doesn't happen anymore. So the line comes up at a couple of major shops overnight, let's say -2.5. Well, all it takes a guy like me to do is bet in my Pinnacle, in my, in these particular accounts, and bet the wrong way. So you could bet the wrong way and actually manipulate the line. So you could bet the opposite way for $500. It sounds crazy, I know. For $500, I could take the 2.5 on whoever I own is playing in 2 or 3 different spots. And if you do that, the whole entire market's going to move maybe even a full point to the 1.5. So therefore, I don't have to buy the 2 no more. I don't have to I'm even going to lay 1.5 on Iona. So 3 spots, sometimes 2 spots. That's how simple it is. And every single sports book in the world will move their line. For $1,000, I just bet the wrong way on a game, and then I'm going to come back tomorrow hoping that there's no other sharp guy out there that noticed this move before me, and I'm going to bet the right way everywhere in the world for 10, 15, 20 times as much. It's a great thing to do. It's being done by some of the syndicates, but not as much as you would think. Not as much as you would think, the manipulation. But if there's guys that are looking at this from another perspective and seeing, this is happening here, and I should maneuver players in fantasy because of this. This is the sharp money's getting this. It's not always that. And this even happens in the NFL, Warren. You see it sometimes early Saturday mornings. Sunday mornings. We've seen lines on totals move 3-4 points. They've actually moved the wrong way than the right way. There's so many middlers and scalpers out there that attempt to middle and scalp. By the way, in my opinion, I don't middle and scalp. I can't get enough down the right way to be able to middle and scalp. Maybe in the NFL I could, but definitely not in a college basketball game. I mean, I'm in Vegas. I only have so many sports books I can bet at. So I actually don't even middle and scalp. But there is crews of guys. That's all they do is they'll bet in a bot, which is actually a robot computer program. They'll press one button and it'll bet all their outs, and the whole screen will move a ton of points one way. Right now, the poker guys, they're the sharpest guys out there. They're the guys that are moving the lines ridiculously. Matter of fact, they're over-moving lines. So whatever they bet moves 2-3 points, even in the NFL. This is shocking me this year. It's amazing how little the bookmakers really know. I hate to say it. They're over-moving lines off this group of poker guys who, by the way, haven't won in the NFL. They're not even winning. But, however, they do destroy the baseball market, and I do understand why they would move it like that. But not as much in the NFL as college, because they have been successful in the college football also in the past, not to the point of their baseball, though. So there's a lot of stuff going on, though, out there. It's not just when you see a move one way, it's not just a sharp move one way. As a matter of fact, me and my guys, we'll bet against the poker guys a lot. We're actually betting a lot against the poker guys this college football season. And, it just is an unusual season again. No, I don't think it is. We won about 80 units last year. We're up 40-some units, 45 units this year already. And a lot of them are against those moves. And sometimes those moves made us a winner where we would have a loser. Sometimes we're taking 8 in a game where we would have took 6.5 or 6. So, but Warren, tell me what else you want me to speak on, because I know I have terrible ADD and my mind's racing. So just tell me what you want. I'll give it to you.
Yeah. So when you're talking about some of these games have the potential to be set up. Let's say a guy looks at the screen on a Tuesday and he sees what the lines are for the NFL. And then he looks back at the screen on a Wednesday and he sees a couple of games may have moved a little bit in one direction or another. Like, how much would you advise that they glean from that in terms of them feeling like that is the quote-unquote sharp side? As opposed to...
I'll give you a perfect example. I went to go bet today being a Thursday morning. This actually shocked me when I called you on it earlier. I went to go bet what I feel is the sharpest sports book in the world. I went to go bet today, I don't know, what I really won like $5,000 on it. I bet $3,000 on a total. It denied it, and they had $500 maximum bets today. And this is the sharpest sports book in the world that most of the other sports books follow. $500 maximum bet, and they're that's all they're taking on a Thursday. I mean, it's almost an embarrassment. Like this sports book used to take $5,000. They're taking $500. Just it actually shocks me that on a Thursday that happened to me. And even the big books out here, people that are sitting in the middle of America and back home listening to this, they think you can come to Vegas and bet thousands of dollars on games and all the sharp monies, and they see people's tickets. Maybe they see like a tout that puts copies of their tickets or copies of their customers' tickets. Well, it's real simple. If someone's betting $10,000, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 on a game, they're letting them bet that because they're allowed to bet that on a hand of baccarat, on a hand of craps, on a hand of. So that's all BS. But secondly, like I said, people think you can come to Vegas. I challenge anyone to come to Vegas, and they could pick any college basketball game they want. Take the line, go around town, and see how much money you can get down on the side. First of all, you're going to need your ID for anything over $500. You're going to need a player's card. You go to even the Hilton, who I respect those guys at the Hilton. Even the Hilton, they want a player card. You go in there and bet $1,000, they're going to want a player card. And they're only going to take $1,000 on certain things. They're only going to take $500 on certain things. So cumulatively, collectively, you're not going to get down a lot of money here in Vegas on a game unless you want to take a wide array of lines. Unless you want to take a wide, you want to go under, or you want to go, whatever. Wake Forest -7, Wake Forest -8, and then lay at 8.5 again. Then you can get down maybe 20,000, maybe. But then you're laying terrible lines. I mean, so it's not what people think when they come out to Vegas, because most people are small bettors. So anyway, so they come out, they have a good time with their friends, everything's fine, and the casinos love them. They're betting their parlay cards, they're betting their favorite team from back home. It's great. They all love that kind of, and the casinos welcome that book. When I walk in a book, it's totally different. I bet $1,000. Warren, I bet yesterday. I went in to bet one of our NFL totals this week. I went in to bet Cantor, which is one of the hugest sports books in the world here. I have a ridiculous amount of money in their app. I went to go bet Cantor. I was shocked. They told me $1,000 maximum in the NFL on a total. Shocked. I was like, what? And you know what I told them? I swear to God, I told them this, Warren, make you laugh. I said, there's old ladies back in the city booking that out of their bra. I mean, really. It's like, that's what I told. I swear to God, I said, listen, you call up the M, because I was at the Hard Rock. I told the supervisor, call the M over there to the supervisors. Tell them I said it, Bill Krackomberger. There's old ladies back home booking out of their bra more than $1,000 on the NFL thing. I mean, it's true. But that's what you grew up with. Years ago, that's what you grew up with. People booking out of their candy stores, out of their homes, and it's just ridiculous out here. It really is. But so the market's not what you think it is. But I will give you one big, probably the best thing I'll tell you on this podcast. The real money comes in when you see a book like Pinnacle begging for a bet on something game time. Begging for a bet. And if you just Google the Krackman method with a K, you'll see back in 2006 in Casino Player magazine I gave him that quote. And it's still on the internet, I'm sure. But the real money is when Pinnacle is begging for a bet. When Pinnacle begs for a bet, and then you see maybe Grande and Catalina, these places are begging for bets. And even Cantor, because Cantor does get some sharp money here from time to time. That's when in the long run, if you're making that bet at Pinnacle or Cantor in the long run, or Catalina or Grande, that bet's a losing bet in the end.
Explain what that means. Explain what you mean when you're saying to the listeners when you're saying that they're begging for a bet. Explain that concept.
That's good. I got to put it in some layman's terms. You're right. So what I mean by that is -3 on a football game. Let's say -3 is everywhere. But Pinnacle's -3 plus 0.2 or plus 0.5. For every $100 you bet, you get back 105. But meanwhile, everywhere else in the world, if I was going to make that bet, I'd have to lay 110 or 105, depending on what the line is. But if my best option is to make that bet at Pinnacle, I'm on the wrong side of that game over the long term, without a doubt. If Pinnacle wants that action, I'm on the wrong side of the bet. And now, what I mean by this, too, it's not 3 hours, 5 hours before the game. I'm talking the last 15 minutes of the game. They're begging. They need money on the other side. And that means that's not just to balance their books. They actually want to get off that side. They want to give you they're a gambling sports book. People don't know this. Pinnacle is very much of a gambling sports book over the years. The idea to put up a line is to get equal action on both sides of the bet. There's no personal opinion on lines with the line makers. They have to put up a line that they're going to get equal amount of action on both sides. Ideally, it doesn't happen, But with Pinnacle, that wasn't the case. Pinnacle is a sports book that actually was looking to gamble on games. These aren't your average guys. You know, the Pinnacle is some of the sharpest guys in the world. These are Stanford, Ivy League guys and grads. These aren't, the original computer group is what Pinnacle is. Just do a Google search on the original computer group, and it's a great 27-page dossier of Billy Walters and some of the guys that are involved in the industry. It's a great story. I can't believe I actually get that out. I never talk about that, but so if that helps anybody, really, like I said, I wrote the story called the Krackman Method on this, and again, just to help people. I don't know why, and I got yelled at from sharp guys and from bookmakers alike. But I don't know. It's just what I do.
Yeah, they do that begging for money in even the biggest games. I remember we were out at the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and they were doing the same thing.
Correct.
I mean, they do that.
Pinnacle was giving you 6 figures on that bet. 6-figure
Right.
bets they wanted to take on one side, and of course they were right. By the way, Pinnacle has been right 4 Super Bowls in a row. So.
Wow. So now I'll ask one more here before I throw it over to Evan to ask a couple of questions if he has any. So if you're a guy, let's pretend that you're a guy playing daily fantasy or even betting on these games, and you're trying to get a gauge as to where the sharp money is on some of these games. And let's say it's just a Thursday, like today, and you look at the screen and you saw where the game's open and you see where they're sitting now, and it's not the last 5 or 10 minutes before the game starts, using that technique you just discussed. It's a couple days in advance, but the market is starting to mature a little bit, and they're getting ready to raise the limits and that sort of thing. What is the best way? Or, I mean, obviously, we do something different because we have access to different types of information, and we're not going to go into that on this podcast. But for the regular guy who's just looking at an odds screen, is there anything that they should not do or not assume just by looking at the screen on a Thursday about a particular game that might help them in their decision making? Like sometimes. So
you're talking about NFL here, Warren?
Yes, only NFL. Sometimes pointing out things that they should not do is just as good as telling them what they should do. So if they want to try to find out or get an idea, what they do is they look at the games, and like Evan was describing earlier, the way that they try to calculate implied team totals, they want to get a good sense as to how the sharp sports bettors feel about a particular team based on how many points they're projecting that team will score. Because the guys for daily fantasy, they don't want to start a bunch of players if the odds say that this team should only score 10 points or 13 points in a game. They want to go for the guys on the teams that are going to score more points because then their players are going to generate more statistics. Therefore, what should these guys be looking at to try to get from the screen itself, if anything, during a random Thursday or a Friday?
But are you saying Thursday? Okay, good. You just said it's Friday too. I was just saying you mean Thursday night game. No, you mean for the Sunday's games though.
Yeah. Let's say for the Sunday's games, exactly.
Well, I'll just tell you, I think you need to look at across the board movement, not just the stronger books in town. I think you need now. I see when I say this, I don't know if your listeners or these fantasy people, if they have screens, and when I mean screens, do they have Don Best screens? Do they have the sports option screens? Do they have free line services on Vegas Insider? I don't know what they're looking at.
Yeah, let's assume that most of them have what you can get at my site, which is sharpfootballanalysis.com. You can go to my site, and there's a tab there called Lines. And you basically see it's maybe delayed 5 seconds, but you see Pinnacle, you see Chris, you see Westgate, you see Bovada, you see some of the sharp books in Vegas, you see some of the square books offshore, as well as some sharp books offshore.
Well, Bovada's the squarest. Bovada's the absolute squarest. I would never pay them no attention. They're always going to be a point higher on everything. And if you wind up betting them, you're going to get thrown out. So any of the dogs. So I wouldn't even consider that Mickey Mouse operation a book. But however, the ones that are on the screen, for key injuries, for key movements, I would look for an across-the-board move to stick. I would want to watch. Do you have PPH on your screen, Warren, on your site, or no?
Not on my site, no.
Okay.
Not public.
I would want to look at indicators in the market, too. indicator books like Jazz. This is my indicator book. So always keep your eye on Jazz or ABC. They usually get a lot of the first. They write a lot of different business for a lot of different people. So I would keep an eye on that book. But I would also make sure it's in line with the Pinnacle and the Chris and the Grande, like I said. I really have no more to add to this subject because this particular question you're asked, I kind of covered. It's really more of day of game, unless we bet a game. Unless I hate to say it, unless Sharp Football Analysis bet an NFL total, that's going to stick. I mean, we bet over 51 and a half on a game last week. On Thursday it was 55. You can't bet it, you know what I'm saying? But however, at least they know where the line opened, and you should look at the Pinnacle openers, or you can even look at the Chris openers. Just look at the openers compared to the current line, and know. It's closer to game time. That line means a lot. It means the real deal. Especially the great example I just used was our game last week. We had over San Diego 51 and a half. I mean, it almost went over in the first half. So therefore, the fantasy players would put those players in on offense or be more apt to put those players in on offense because of the line move. And the line move was made, and it was a legit line move. It wasn't a manipulation, and there's been really not a ton of manipulation early in the week on NFL line moves because you just don't see it as much as these guys would do it on game day. Because, and I'll tell you why. On game day in the NFL, Warren, and I never discussed this with you, on game day in the NFL, what happens is there's so much stuff going on that there's so many games going on, and there's so much big money coming in, and I say big money, the offshore money is big money, that automatically a line maker will see it. Oh, they call themselves line makers. The copycat guys will see it, and they just automatically move it right away because they have to get to the next game and the next move, and they have to approve other bets, and it's getting close to game time. That's why it's actually easier to manipulate on game time, on game day. I'm sorry, not game time, on game day than it is a couple days ahead of time when no one else is betting. But on game day, when all the bets are flying in on the computers and they have to approve bets, it's much easier for a line maker to move a game from, let's say, 52 to 53 and a half just on air, just because he sees it starting to move everywhere. And then we've seen the real money come in on the dog. So I'm sorry, on the underdog, on the under. So if that means anything, we haven't talked about that yet, Warren, but that's also something to take into consideration.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll throw it over to Evan to ask a question or two or anything follow-up. Anything jumping out to you, Evan, right now that you wanted to try to get answered from Crack while we've got him here?
Yeah, Bill, thanks for coming on with us, man. This is a great opportunity. I just have a couple basic questions. Can you just describe what reverse line movement is and what causes it? And, are there any takeaways that you could think of that we could take away from reverse line movement?
Now, when you're saying reverse line movement, you're saying like a game moving one way to then coming on the other side?
Yes.
Or I think what he's talking about primarily is the public looks to be on one side. They're all betting the Patriots. Like, let's say this week against the Bills, all like 70% of the bets, according to some of these tracking sites, are coming in on the Patriots. Yet the line moves from 7 to 6.5 down to 6. And clearly the money's coming in on the Bills, but it seems like the public is on the Patriots.
Right. Well, actually, in that case, it's 100% correct. And whenever there's a public team like the Patriots, that when the line maker puts that line out there, in the end, if there was just to be a line on every single Patriot game, it would probably be a point higher than it should be, with the anticipation of the favorite money coming in, knowing that that's the way the public's going to bet on the favorite. So, and for that example, 100% that the Patriots is the public side. However, the sharp side, for unbelievable money, came in on the dog from the wise guys, from the sharp guys like me. Because if I'm moving a public line from 7 to 6 on game day especially, brother, that line, that side's the right side overall. They may lose that day, but I'm definitely going to win that bet 57, 58% of the time. But again, my ADD is running crazy. So can you just explain that question on Warren? Can you just tell me what else you want to know about that? Like why the reverse?
Not necessarily why. Like, you did a good job of explaining what it is and what it means. But is there anything that we can really take away from that? Like, if we're using the fact that we notice it and we're seeing it, let's say on a Thursday or a Friday or a Saturday, we're seeing that the line looks to be, the underdog is getting fewer and fewer points, but it looks like this favorite team, like everybody's talking about how they should win this game easily. Like, are those all, I mean, how often should we trust, and I'm saying we are like the people who are making these decisions, how often should we trust that that line movement is correct, and should we use any of that movement in our decision making? In other words, hey, we really liked the Patriots this week, but we're seeing this move towards the Bills, and now we're getting a little bit scared because the public, if really the money was on the Patriots, that line would be going to -7, -7.5, -8, but it's going the other way. Now we're a little bit scared. How scared should we be in terms of trying to make decisions on this game?
With a public team, with a public team like that, like Denver or New England, or even Seattle, even though they're not playing as good as they did, with these public teams, you absolutely should be scared. The real money is definitely on the dog. Especially, again, I just gave you guys a treasure map and pointed to where the gold is. So right before game time, that is when the real deal moves come in. That is when the real deal stuff is up there. That's when, getting closer to game time, when Pinnacle's begging for a bet, begging you to bet New England -6 even, or -6 plus 0.5, when there's still 6.5 on the board. And even Vegas is maybe shading 6.5, -20, -15. So that the real money is definitely the late move money. I know I'm being repetitive, but there's nothing really I can go into more because I can't further enhance that answer because I don't know how to do it.
Right. So as it pertains to our decision making, we should probably wait until Sunday morning, maybe at, I don't know, 10:30 a.m. or a couple hours before the game and see where the line movement has gone, and then apply that to our decision making. I had one more question, Bill. Are game totals projections put out by the line makers, or is that? I mean, like, how do the books come up with the totals on the games?
Years ago, it was power rankings. They actually come out a power rating of offense and defense. I've actually been privy to some of those meetings, which I've never discussed with Warren. Years ago, it actually was not just the collective score of what they've scored this year, but they actually come up with an offense-defense power rating of each team. And I don't know if it's done that way anymore, but I know it definitely was. But the projected score, they obviously say, well, this team can think about it. They actually say, well, this team should be favored over this team by a touchdown. Now we know it's 7 more points. So what do you say? So the numbers will show like 27-20. Well, if we're saying they should be ahead by 7, what's a real number? You can't put like 18. It just doesn't. It's hard to score 18. So 27-20 would be a real number. And or 20, so that would reflect the 7 points. Well, then that's how they come up with that 47, because they're saying that this could be the projected score. Now I don't know if it's still done that way, and I'm sorry guys, I'm walking back at the Hard Rock. I got to play round 2 here, but I'm good while I'm walking. You may just hear some music in the background, but does that help you guys at all?
Yeah, that does. Any others, Evan, or do you want me to throw one more out there?
No, man, we can let him go enjoy his night for sure.
Yeah, and listen, I'll come on again with you guys anytime you want to be able to, if I can help you more in a different setting when I'm home in front of my computer, have a clearer head. I'm just rambling here, doing my spontaneous thing with you guys, which normally makes for a better show. So.
Yeah, no, I think
Thanks,
it's been
Bill.
Certainly helpful, and we appreciate it. Good luck, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Take care.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that discussion with Bill Krackman and Krackomberger, where we walked through some things that you might be able to see on the screen. Now let's dive into the bulk of what we like to do on this podcast, and that is break down some games, discuss some of the X's and O's, and why we think certain players may perform well, and why we think others may not. And that's, as always, we're joined by Evan Silva of rotoworld.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Evan Silva. You can check out his matchups article every single week over on rotoworld.com, which he will tweet out when it is first published, so you will never have to miss it. But he puts those things out on Thursdays for the entire slate for the Sunday and Monday games. So they're definitely must read every single week. Evan, let's just jump right into it because we were talking a little bit with Bill beforehand. Let's go ahead and dive right into an interesting game where we have a couple of quarterbacks who, were not there a couple of weeks back, and now they're both there. Each team's reinserted these players who were starters earlier in the year, and I'm talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick for the New York Jets, and we're talking about for the Cleveland Browns. They're going back to Josh McCown, apparently, to be their starter this week because he seems to be healthy enough. What is your take on this game, which is kind of getting the reinsertion of, I'd say, the two most successful quarterbacking options that either team has?
Yeah, I like this game a lot. I think that it's got more daily fantasy appeal than it might seem when you think Jets and Browns. Josh McCown has a great price on both daily fantasy sites, and he's a good quarterback. He's got multiple touchdown passes in 6 of his last 8 games. He's gone over 260 passing yards in 5 of those games. He's got some pretty decent weapons. Terrell Pryor was limited last week with a hamstring injury, but he did play, and he's practiced all this week. He should be good to go. And Gary Barnidge is a legit difference maker, and I think that he has a chance at a really big game against the Jets, who have gotten crushed by tight ends. On the other side, Ryan Fitzpatrick, angry Ryan Fitzpatrick, is going to be taking on a Browns defense that has allowed multiple touchdown passes in 15 of its last 16 games. Every quarterback that has faced the Browns so far has thrown multiple touchdown passes this year. The Browns have played okay run defense in the first month or so of the season, but we really saw them get carved up last week by Jeremy Hill and to a little bit lesser extent Giovanni Bernard. I think that this game goes over the total, which is 43 points. And I like in daily fantasy Ryan Fitzpatrick to some extent, Josh McCown to some extent, love Gary Barnidge. I think Brandon Marshall has a chance to bounce back after being kind of disappointing last week against Baltimore. Matt Forte as well. He got a huge workload last week. The Jets kind of recommitted to him as their featured guy, and their offense has just been better when they've used Matt Forte as a true feature back instead of rotating him with Bilal Powell. So I think that there are a lot of interesting DFS plays. I like, you wrote an article basically before the season talking about how instead of using Vegas or instead of using the game totals as a Bible, we really should be trying to figure out which games are going to go over the total. And I think that this game goes over the total.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, through some of the research that you had been done over at RotoWorld, I furthered that and certainly found that, the key is tracking the games that you project to be higher scoring than what the odds makers are forecasting. Those are the games that you're going to find the most edges in terms of your point per dollar when you're, trying to build your rosters, where you're going to find some of the best buys out there, so to speak. And one of the interesting things about this game, if you look at, what we think, we obviously have to look at game script and game flow, and here in this case, we've got the Jets favored on the road, and so that's obviously not that appealing because this is a 2-5 team. How can they be favored on the road? But they're taking on a team in the Browns that, man, this Browns team battles, they fight, they try to stay in games as best as possible. They've been put in a number of very difficult situations and have kept it going, and they're searching for, one win. I don't see this team as being a team that wants to turn their season around and try to win like 6 games and then miss out on a bunch of great draft picks, but they certainly don't want to go down as a team that was 0-16. I mean, nobody wants that. And so whether or not they tank some games later on in the season, I have a feeling that they are really interested in trying to get that 0 in the win column erased. And when you look at the Jets, though, in terms of who they faced, they have faced a very difficult schedule of opposing defenses of late. If you look at their last 4 games, they played the number 3 Seattle Seahawks defense, the number 4 Arizona Cardinals defense, and the number 6 Baltimore Ravens defense within the last 3 weeks. And sprinkled in there, they had a road trip to Pittsburgh, who doesn't have as tremendous of a defense by the efficiency metrics, but whose offense at that point in time when Ben was there, and they had a full health complement of players, they were able to maintain possession and held the Jets down to just 13 points. But you definitely get the sense that the Jets could be poised to explode offensively, and if that's the case, then they're going to drag the Cleveland Browns along with them. The big concern that I had without McCown in there, if it was going to be, what was the quarterback's name out of Stanford, who was the third?
Kevin Hogan.
Yeah, exactly, Hogan. He was, much more of like a inefficient passer, run-based oriented quarterback, and that really would not have done the job very well against the Jets, who have a very strong run defense. They rank third in defensive rush efficiency. So that kind of battle is what I'm most intrigued to see now. I want to see how that run defense stacks up against the Cleveland rushing attack, which can catch people off guard. And then now that Pryor has another week of health infused back into him following his injury in a game that he escaped without further injury last week, if he can build upon that. And now that he's got a quarterback that's actually going to be able to throw the ball around the field a little bit, what type of damage they can do to this Jets secondary, which has been abused by so many teams this season, including like teams that we just saw play to like a ridiculous low-scoring game in overtime. You know, the Seahawks put up 27 and the Cardinals put up 28 on this Jets defense, and those are teams that offenses are really struggling. So, I would definitely tend to agree in terms of some offensive firepower in this game as being a potential. If you're looking at the Browns, do you look anywhere besides primarily Pryor? Are you looking at Barnage at all, or are you looking at anybody past those two guys?
Yeah, I think the more that I have really dug into tight end plays in daily fantasy this week, I think the more that I like Gary Barnage from a floor standpoint and from a ceiling standpoint. With no Corey Coleman for another week, and with Terrell Pryor, I mean, I think that he'll probably be like 80 or 90% this week. But also with Josh McCown's history with Gary Barnage. I mean, Gary Barnage in Josh McCown starts was an elite fantasy performer. And that didn't carry over into Josh McCown's week 2 start. That was a game that Corey Coleman just straight dominated. He was matched up with Sharice Wright, the Ravens' number 2 cornerback, and I mean just flamed them all game long, and then wound up getting hurt. But I think that Gary Barnage will probably be the go-to guy this week for Josh McCown.
Yeah, excellent. Well, no, I would not argue with that one bit. So let's jump now to one other game where we've got a team that's playing, again, another road favorite, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. This time it's actually a team who has a winning record, and they're going to take on the Indianapolis Colts 3-4 team who is struggling in the AFC South, but trying to get their season back on track. Obviously, this game right now has a very high total. It's one of the highest totals of the week at between 49.5 at most spots, and some spots have 50 as we're recording this right now. Alex Smith, obviously, we've got a team that plays this short style of passing attack, but can get some explosive plays generated there, particularly against the Colts defense that has been susceptible at times. And, of course, I think one guy you can't bypass talking about is, of course, Spencer Ware. I think he's definitely in the sights this week as a solid a possibility to perform extremely well. But on the other side of things, you've got the Indianapolis Colts who are going to try to test out this Kansas City secondary. Still 1 week without Justin Houston. Obviously, we know what happens when Justin Houston comes back. This defense will be able to get up to the quarterback a little bit better and probably perform better. But what is your take on this game when the Colts host the Chiefs?
Yeah, so the Chiefs have just been getting no pressure on the quarterback. I mean, they are last in the NFL in quarterback hits, last in the NFL in sacks. They haven't been great in run defense. In 2 of their past 3 games, they faced Ben Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh and Drew Brees on the road, where he historically does not perform nearly as well, and especially late in his career. I mean, those splits have gotten even worse. But he tore them up. I mean, almost 370 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Ben Roethlisberger and Drew Brees both finished as top 2 fantasy quarterbacks in those respective weeks. And then in between, the Chiefs played a game in Oakland where the wind was a factor, and the Chiefs just rolled up in time of possession. I mean, they held the ball for almost 38 minutes. The Raiders only had it for like 22 or 23, and Derek Carr was not good in fantasy that week. But, we've got a pretty significant track record here of the Chiefs due to their inability to rush the passer and some weaknesses in the secondary, that they are giving up big fantasy performances to opposing quarterbacks. I mean, really, really big games. So I like Andrew Luck this week. My one concern here, though, is could the game sort of play out like that Week 6 game did, where Spencer Ware just pretty much dominated the game. Because the Colts obviously don't have a great run defense either. And I guess that would be one recipe for this game to maybe not exceed the total. But when I first saw it, I was like, I think that this game has shootout potential, and I looked more into it. But I think the time of possession battle, I guess, could be an obstacle to that. But, Andrew Luck has been so good recently, top 10 fantasy quarterback in 4 straight weeks. Looks like he's getting back Dante Moncrief. He's definitely getting back Philip Dorsett. So they're just going to have more weapons out there. They won't be trotting out Chester Rogers as much or Eric Swoop. They have actual NFL players that they will be able to use that this week. And I think all that's good news. What is your take on this game?
Yeah, the interesting part, if we're talking about any team that's going to play this defense of the Colts, and you're absolutely right, they rank dead last in defensive rush efficiency. So that's an immediate red flag when you're playing a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, who is just as happy throwing the ball short down the field and handing the ball off to the running back a lot and salting away games in the second half. But here's the thing, you're always talking about this Colts defense and how terrible they are. But if you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, they have not played terrible defenses for a while. The best defenses that they have faced this entire season came weeks 1 and 2, and that was the Chargers, actually, who had a good defense. Statistically, they still rank as the 8th overall defense in terms of defensive efficiency, and the Texans, which rank 12th in defensive efficiency. Since week 2, they've played the Jets, who rank 27th, the Steelers, who rank 25th, the Raiders, who rank 28th, the Saints, who rank 29th, and now the Colts, who rank 31st. And if you look at what they've done against these teams, it's pretty consistent. Against these bad defenses, they put up 24 against the Jets. They put up 26 against the Raiders. They put 27 against the Saints. They aren't scoring into the 30s. They're controlling the clock. They're winning these games by, 6 or more points. And they're keeping those good offenses on the sideline, not allowing them to do very much, well, aside from the Jets. But it's not like they're dominating and stomping these bad defenses that they're going up against. They're not putting up 30 burgers and higher, which who knows what will happen specifically in this game based upon a number of factors. But so from that perspective, you're talking about the Indianapolis Colts playing at home, if the Chiefs are only going to get into the mid-20s, I definitely think that the Colts can be competitive here and produce against this defense, which, like you mentioned, does not rush the passer. And actually, if you look at the Indianapolis Colts and you go over to sharpfootballstats.com and you look at some of the strength of schedule visualizations, you will see that they have played a number of teams recently that have been very good about getting after the opposing quarterback. The Texans and the Titans were the last couple of teams that they faced. Those teams very good at getting after the opposing quarterback. Actually, the Chiefs rank as the worst defense that they will have played so far this season in terms of getting a pass rush on them. And the Chiefs have to play on the road, and they have to still play without Justin Houston for yet another week. So I definitely think that there will be opportunities for Andrew Luck. So I guess from that perspective, if there's opportunities for Luck here without that pass rush, and we know that the Colts seem to go by how well Luck is doing. If he's struggling, unlikely they're going to stay in games. They're just so built around Andrew Luck and his success. The question is, which wide receivers or tight end would you select from this matchup from the Colts that you think might be best paired with Andrew Luck if you want to take Luck this week?
Easily T.Y. Hilton. Easy answer. I think he rips it up. There's really just nothing to worry about in the Kansas City secondary. I know a lot of people like Marcus Peters. He makes plays on the football. He gets interceptions. But T.Y. Hilton doesn't run routes against left cornerbacks, and Marcus Peters plays 93% of his snaps at left cornerback. And he's going to be running routes at the Chiefs' weakest cornerbacks who have been injured, who have been smoked in coverage. And I think T.Y. Hilton has positive home game splits over the course of his career. You're definitely playing Andrew Luck with T.Y. Hilton. Jack Doyle had a big game last week against Tennessee. He's got a much tougher matchup. The Chiefs usually use, or almost always use, Eric Berry in man coverage. Of course, Eric Berry, the Chiefs franchise player, the 2015 NFL Comeback Player of the Year. They're just one of the best safeties in the game, if not the best safety. And that's concerning for Jack Doyle. But, it should just put on more action toward T.Y., who has at least 9 targets in every game this season. I think T.Y. should rip it up. It looks really good for him, just the way this game sets up.
And what do you think about Ware on the other side? How high would you rank him in terms of, you don't have to give a specific number, but in terms of your desire to utilize him on different slates this week in different formats? Like, what is your? Obviously, it looks like he should, with Jamal Charles kind of being not yet a guy that they want to really unleash whatsoever. They're kind of easing him in, and his knees have had some issues coming back. What are they going to do with Ware? How big do you feel like he's able to do this week?
I mean, just in terms of raw projected fantasy points, he's a top 5 running back play this week. I don't know if I'm going to go in on him like crazy. I did last week, and that paid off. But there are some guys at cheaper price points. Devontae Booker, who opened up when C.J. Anderson got hurt. Devontae Booker has been excellent. He should get a ton of work against San Diego. I really like Devonta Freeman this week against the Packers, who do have a strong run defense, but the only time that they really faced a legitimate rushing attack, they got rocked at Lambeau, and now they are at Atlanta against another legitimate running game, and no Tevin Coleman. And he is cheaper than Spencer Ware as well, Devonta Freeman is. So that kind of has me struggling a little bit with Spencer Ware. But, I mean, he's certainly not a bad play. You know, again, in terms of just raw projected points, he would be a top 5 guy this week.
Gotcha. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. Let's keep it moving in terms of breaking down these games, and let's head down to Florida, where we've got the Oakland Raiders, who stayed in Florida this past week after their game last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and now they're taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who travel in out of a game out of the West Coast. Obviously, this matchup, of course, anytime that you're going to be talking about the Oakland Raiders, you're going to be talking about a team who was suspected to be this great defensive team, whose offense was supposed to be there as well, and the defense clearly is not yet on the same page in terms of their performance as the offense. This defense has really struggled a lot this year. They ranked 28th in overall efficiency. So certainly some disappointment there from Raiders fans, but they are, I am sure, very pleased with the 5-2 overall record for this team. What's your take on this matchup here? We know that Jacquizz Rodgers has been having to carry the load for Tampa Bay thus far, and they performed very well last week, but what do you expect out of this offense this upcoming week against the Oakland Raiders defense?
Yeah, the Tampa Bay defense looked really good last week. I mean, Jameis Winston, when he's like playing in control, I mean, he looks like a legit elite quarterback. I understand that it was a weak opponent, but this is a weak opponent as well. The Chiefs or the Raiders are another team that just does not rush the quarterback at all. Jack Del Rio is content to play his vanilla style of defense where they don't blitz. They try to just win with their guys, and they just straight don't win. He did this in Denver with one of the most talented defenses in football in 2014. I remember this was it was just infuriating to me because I knew how much talent the Broncos defense had, but they weren't like a playmaking defense. And then Wade Phillips comes along, and they're the best defense in the NFL. They're creating pick sixes. Von Miller's, he's the best defensive player in the league. But this is what's going on with the Raiders right now. Their personnel really isn't that bad. I mean, they have some issues for sure, but they're an underachieving unit relative to their talent, just like that 2014 Denver defense was. And they haven't stopped the run, and they don't get any pressure on the quarterback, and that hurts the play of their high-pressed cornerbacks. And they've given up a league high over 1,400 receiving yards so far to opposing receivers. No defense is allowing more receiving yards to opposing wideouts. So that bodes really well for Mike Evans. Jacquizz Rodgers has 35 and 27 touches in his last 2 games. We saw the undrafted rookie Peyton Barber, the number 2 back for the Bucs, come alive last week against San Francisco. I think that he should get some run in this spot as well. And I like the Raiders offense. I like their side too, particularly the passing game. The Bucs have played pretty good run defense so far, allowing just 3.7 yards per carry to opposing RBs. And Crabtree has been really good in his slot or in his possession slash red zone role. And then Amari Cooper has been a little bit more up and down, but usually when he has had a slow game, he's bounced back for a spiked week. I mean, he over the course of the season, he's 6th in the NFL in receptions and 6th in receiving yards. I mean, he's a big-time player. He's an incredible talent, and he should be able to get open against a pretty bad Bucs secondary. So I think that this is another game that has a chance to go over the total. I mean, it's already like around 50. So, I mean, that's already kind of aggressive. But I think it's got a shot to go over the total, and that makes me like the players in this game for daily fantasy.
Yeah, this game is a tricky one to figure out for me, at least in terms of it's obviously a short number here. The line opened up with Tampa Bay basically at a pick-em. The line got bet towards Tampa Bay, then money came back on Oakland, and so right now it's about a pick-em. There's a couple spots that might have Oakland -1. There's a one spot I'm seeing as Tampa -1, but most of them are right now back at a pick-em. I mean, clearly the public is backing the Oakland Raiders at 5-2 off of a win against Jacksonville. Now that win against Jacksonville certainly doesn't look as good as it did as we're recording this actually a day early on Thursday night. We just saw Jacksonville score a bunch of garbage time stuff like is their MO late in the game to try to boost their score, but they got absolutely boat raced by the Tennessee Titans on the short week. But let's talk about this game here, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And one of the concerns that I have for the Bucs is the fact that they have not faced very many offenses like Oakland's. If you look at their schedule, they played one offense that really ranks even in the inside the top 20 in terms of passing efficiency, and that was the Atlanta Falcons Week 1. Now we know Tampa Bay won that game on the road. I had them on that game on the road, but they've played like the likes of the Cardinals and the Rams and the Broncos and the Panthers, whose passing offense is not nearly as good this year as it was last year. And then, of course, they just played the San Francisco 49ers, who ranked dead last in passing efficiency. Now they take on the Oakland Raiders, who rank number 5, and the Oakland Raiders also have the number 1 pass-protecting offensive line. So Carr could have some time in this game, and the Bucs secondary really hasn't been tested, in my opinion. If you look at the last couple of opponents that they faced, they've won those games, but those have not been really dominant passing offenses. And we know that Carolina had some protection issues as well. So they're not going to be able to get any pressure on Carr. And this is an offense that Carr is bringing to the table that is unlike what Tampa's faced recently. I'm wondering, their adversity and how they're going to be able to perform from that perspective. Now, the other thing on the positive for Tampa Bay is that the Oakland Raiders defense is one of the worst that they will have played. And we know that in games they play good defenses, they have lost. And when they played bad defenses, they have won. If you look at the 3 games they lost, they're all clustered together, weeks 2, 3, and 4. They played the Arizona Cardinals, the LA Rams, and the Denver Broncos. They lost all 3 of those games. If you look at the games they won, it came against bad defenses: 26th rated Atlanta Falcons, 21 rated Carolina Panthers, 24 rated San Francisco 49ers. Now they play the 28th rated defense of the Oakland Raiders, and so they won all of those games. So from that perspective, I see some positives for this offense in terms of what they could produce. They hit over 30 points in both of those games against those bad defenses of the 49ers and of the Atlanta Falcons. So, yeah, there's certainly some positives, and if you kind of put 2 and 2 together, it does look like there is the potential here for there to be some decent point production to be scored. But there are a couple of red flags that make me lean a little bit less. Both these defenses actually rank top 10 in third down efficiency. And while both offenses are decent in the red zone and the defenses are poor there, both offenses are not dominant from an early down success rate perspective. Neither of them are inside of the top 10. And Oakland's defense actually ranks 30th in early down success rate defense, giving a little bit more hope for the Bucs. So this is a very difficult game for me to prognosticate, but I think one thing is clear. If you let any decent quarterback with some good receiving weapons have time to throw the football and you're not getting pressure on them, and it's a passing attack like you haven't faced recently, that is going to be a problem. So as long as Derek Carr didn't literally and figuratively screw around in Florida during this extra time off, hanging out with the Sun Bunnies down there, then, they should get some production out of their offense against the Tampa Bay Bucs defense. But conversely, I actually think that Tampa Bay, this is the type of defense that they played well against, and so this makes for an interesting game. Now, if you're looking at, let's say we want to look at any plays from the Bucs specifically, who are your most likely targets? Are you looking at Quiz because of his price? Are you looking at, I know you mentioned Mike Evans, are you trying to get any Jameis, or where exactly are you looking at there for the top value plays for the Bucs?
Yeah, Quiz is just such an obvious play because his price is still low. His workloads have been huge. I mean, he catch 6 balls in this game, and then the opponent is great. So he checks all those boxes. Same deal with Mike Evans. I mean, he's still underpriced for a guy who is leading the NFL in targets per game, leading the NFL in touchdowns. His price on FanDuel actually went down from last week. And then absolutely Jameis. You know, anytime that I can get a quarterback with his skill set against an opponent like this that doesn't rush the passer, that gives up a ton of big plays in the passing game, you know, against an aggressive quarterback with Jameis' skills, I want to try to take advantage of that. And Winston is certainly underpriced for this spot. So, I mean, I think this is a game where you could create a game stack, and if the game shoots out, you could be in a really good position with either quarterback, some combination of Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, Michael Crabtree, potentially Quiz Rogers as well. You know, I mean, if this game ends up shooting out like I think it might, a bunch of different players can hit big in daily fantasy.
Yeah, and there's a unique scheduling spot here for the Buccaneers. I don't want to say it's identical, but there's similarities with another team this week, and that's the Green Bay Packers, where there's this unique scheduling spot this week. And if you look at what Tampa Bay has faced, even though it's week 8, they've only played 2 games at home. Those teams came week 3 and week 4 back-to-back home games against the Rams and against the Broncos. And guess what? They lost both those games. Poor showings in both of those games. They gave up 27-plus points to both of those teams. But they started out the season with back-to-back road games at Atlanta, at Arizona. Then they came back after losing in that game against Denver. They actually had a massive weather delay, and that they ended up coming back to play. It was in the swap. They lost 27-7. They go to Carolina. They win that game. That was on a short week, right, on Thursday. Then they had a bye week, and then they come back and they go out to San Francisco. So this team has not played a home game since they had this brutal beatdown from the Denver Broncos back in week 4. They've only played 2 home games so far this year. This is their 3rd. This is the start of a 3-game homestand for this team. They play home against the Raiders, home against the Falcons, home against the Bears in consecutive weeks. So it is very unique from that perspective. And anytime you find spots like that could, you know, give a little bit more edge than normal to a home game, that actually means something more to a team that actually hasn't played one in a while, and that the last time they were here they were humiliated. And now they've got a defense that they can kind of make a statement against. That's always something to take under consideration. Last but not least, let's go ahead and talk about the Monday night game up in your neck of the woods, and that is the Minnesota Vikings taking on the rogue Jay Cutlers. We have no idea what Mr. 1-6, which is the Bears' record, is going to try to unleash, not just on the Vikings, but on the entire nation in the world, as this game is on national TV. I mean, he has the perfect opportunity to play, you know, the major anti-hero in this feature film, and just completely humiliate John Fox in front of the whole nation. I mean, we don't know what is going to happen as it relates to Jay Cutler here. What we do know is that the Bears are going up against a very difficult defense in the Minnesota Vikings, who are off of a loss against the Philadelphia Eagles last week and are coming in with a slight bit of extra rest, as do the Bears have, but hungry for a win, hungry to erase that taste of defeat from their mouth. And Jay Cutler certainly has no interest in quenching their thirst. So feel free to let me know what your thoughts are from that area. I know that there's been some quotes in the media about Jay Cutler basically kind of like, I don't know if it was mocking John Fox for saying he really has no other options but to start him at this point, and he may not like it, but that's what he's got to do, and things of that nature. I mean, it certainly doesn't sound like these guys are you know, going on ski trips in the winter together. So what's your take on this game?
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. There's a Thursday lock slate on FanDuel, and where you put in all your lineups, and then you can't on Thursday, because it includes the Thursday game, and then it continues through to the Monday game. And there were 2 defenses that I was trying to decide between. One of them was the Titans, who played really well and then gave up a bunch of points in garbage time, and ended up being a terrible fantasy defense play because, you know, Blake Bortles can't move his offense until the other team is in prevent. And then the other option was the Vikings, and I ended up just going all in on the Vikings. And I think that they are just going to destroy this Bears offense. Not only do we have the potential rogue tendencies of Jay Cutler, but we have two critical offensive line injuries for the Bears. They are going to be missing their left guard, Josh Sitton, due to a high ankle sprain, and then their right guard, Kyle Long, also appears doubtful with a triceps injury. And then the Vikings edge rushers, Daniel Hunter, Everson Griffin, Brian Robeson, I mean, they are just going to have their way with the Bears' offensive tackles. So you have a severe mismatch in the trenches favoring the Vikings. You mentioned that they are off a loss. This is a big game for the Vikings. I mean, this is a division game. They lost last week, you know, and I think that they go to Soldier Field and just wreck. Jay Cutler, you know, he played about 6 quarters to open the season. He took 8 sacks. He looked awful. And then there was a report, in addition to the quotes that you mentioned, there was a report that came out on Thursday or Friday that John Fox had been telling his friends that he was never going to play Jay Cutler again. But now he's got to, because, you know, Matt Barkley is not even close to an NFL quarterback. And, you know, the Bears couldn't justify paying Jay Cutler all the money that they are and playing Matt Barkley over him. So Jay Cutler's going back out there, and I'm interested to see how it goes. My guess is that it goes very, very, very badly for the Bears. Although the best thing that he could do to sabotage the Bears is to go out and play well and hurt their draft selection in the forthcoming draft.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if this guy wants to try to stay involved in the NFL, if he has that as a goal at all, then he's got to try to perform to his best. I'm most intrigued to try to find out what they're going to do from a tactical standpoint, because this is a team that clearly has tried to limit Jay Cutler's involvement, and the numbers completely bear that out, no pun intended. When Jay Cutler was there with Adam Gase last season, this team moved from 63% pass when the game was within 1 score under Mark Trestman, all the way down to 51% pass. It was the second most run-heavy team in the NFL last season when the game was within 1 score, the largest shift from pass to run of any team last season. And what it allowed them to do is, because Jay Cutler wasn't there, because they were running the ball a little bit more and Jay Cutler's involvement was minimized, instead of losing 7 games by 13 or more points, which is what happened under Mark Trestman's watch, they only lost 1 game by over 1 score last season. Big shift, and that's one of the reasons why this team looks so different. And my curiosity was, what are they going to be this year? Because they obviously let Matt Forte walk, they let Adam Gase walk. Well, there goes a lot of their run game and their run preference. Now are they going to go back to a pass-heavy offense? What ended up happening weeks 1 and 2 was they were 55% pass when Jay Cutler was there. But guess what? When Brian Hoyer takes over week 3, this team rockets all the way up from 55% up to 65% pass. And you might say, well, that's only 10% increase. That is massive. That was the 6th most of any team in the NFL, 65% pass. Week 7, without any quarterback really, they had the injury during Green Bay game to Brian Hoyer. They dropped to only 48% pass. They had to go run heavy. Their quarterback was, completely injured. So I'm curious to see, are they going to do Jay Cutler at 55% like they did weeks 1 and 2? Are they going to go back to 65%, which is what they've been recently? What is their strategy really going to be in this spot? Because Jay Cutler, take an example of what Philadelphia did. We were talking about this before we pressed record on this podcast. Philadelphia was able to execute against this Minnesota Vikings defense because they realized that they dropped back and held the ball and tried to let long developing routes there, they would get crushed. They absorbed 6 sacks against the Washington Redskins the week before. So the Philadelphia Eagles decided we're going to get everything out of Wentz's hands quickly. I think he averaged 5-point-something yards per pass attempt last week. Only had 1 pass play that was more than 15 yards in the air that was a completion in the entire game. Everything was short and quick. Well, Jay Cutler is not really that, quick gunning type quarterback who gets back real quick, 3-step drop and the ball's out. He wants to wait for things to develop down the field. He likes to hit Jeffrey deep down the field, and that's exactly what you can't have happen against this Minnesota Vikings pass rush when you're down a couple of offensive linemen. So it just seems like, you tell me if I'm wrong, but it just seems like the actual insertion of Cutler and what he does best, which is chuck the ball down the field, is actually the worst thing that you would want to try to do against the Vikings. We saw the Eagles do the exact opposite last week with a lot of success. That's not really in Jay Cutler's wheelhouse. So from that perspective, I don't know, do you agree with me that this is just going to be really odd to see what they try to do here with Jay Cutler, because we know what his skill set entails. We know they like to run the ball more when he's there. They haven't been running the ball much lately. I'm just really curious to find out what exactly they do tactically against this great Vikings defense.
I mean, they can try to do things tactically, but then Jay Cutler can go rogue and go check into whatever he wants.
True. Exactly.
I mean,
very true.
I've never seen like Jay Cutler change his playing style because he's facing a fierce pass rush. I mean, he's going to get eaten alive, man. It's going to be awesome for owners of the Vikings fantasy defense, I think. And
I will tell you one of the moves that I made. I'm only in a couple fantasy leagues this year, but I let all the other guys choose their defenses first, at least half of them, and I targeted intently the Minnesota Vikings in both of my leagues, and obviously I'm enjoying that choice. I didn't think it was going to play out as well as it has so far, but so I'm one of those guys who's kind of eager to see it play out exactly as you're depicting, for sure.
Yeah. One other element to this game is that in fantasy is that Matt Asiata looks like he could get a ton of work in this game. The Bears are well below average in run defense, 20th in Football Outsiders run defense DVOA. Jerick McKinnon showed up on Thursday with a walking boot on his foot. And I mean, even if he is active for this game, I don't think we're going to see very much of him. And then the only other healthy back on the roster is Ronnie Hillman, whose only carry last year went for a 6-yard loss. The Vikings coaching staff trusts Matt Asiata, who runs a 4.8 740, but he can pass block. He has soft hands. He'll get what's blocked as a runner, and he's always scored a ton of touchdowns. I mean, over the course of his career, he has 13 games where he's seen at least 15 touches or more, has 11 touchdowns in those 13 games. I mean, he's kind of like a poor man's LeGarrette Blount. But he can play in the passing game, too. I think that in fantasy football this week, he is an awesome play against Chicago.
Well, and the other thing, too, looking at the strength of schedule data while you're talking there, obviously we know that the Minnesota Vikings this year have not been a very good rushing offense. They actually ranked dead last in rushing efficiency. But if now you're talking about very positive game flow and you're talking about funneled carries to Asiata as apart from being split up between McKinnon prior to this week, and you're talking about more usage from that perspective. I mean, it's not as if the Chicago Bears have ranked 20th, as you indicated, by going up against tons of great running offenses. Actually, the last 4 weeks they played. Eddie Lacy was not there for the Green Bay Packers, so they played the Packers without Eddie Lacy, and the 3 other teams they played in terms of rushing offenses: the Jaguars, the Lions, and the Colts. So none of those teams is very dominant on the ground. In particular, definitely not the Lions, definitely not the Jaguars. And so it's not as if the Bears have been, getting torn apart by great run offenses, and now they finally will feast on, neutralizing a very bad one. This is a team that has played a lot of bad running offenses of late and allowed yardage totals to those guys. So I can hear you on that, especially if he's getting some goal line work and has the upside to punch in, a score. That would obviously be what we'd be looking for if we're rolling the dice on him this week. What about any other players? I mean, are you looking at any other receivers for the Vikings, or are you mainly just focused on what they can do on the ground?
Yeah, Matt Asiata and the Vikings defense, I think, are my favorite players from this game.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think that was a good rundown through 4 key interesting games. I think that there's some interesting other games, aspects to talk about, but we could go on forever. I think this Green Bay-Atlanta game and the Philadelphia-Dallas game, 2 of the late games on Sunday. And actually, I mean, why don't we say some more crap about what the NFL scheduling department is doing? How can you only schedule 2 games in the 4 o'clock slate? I mean, that is absurd. It just boggles the mind. But unfortunately, they are a couple of great games that should be competitive, should be intriguing to watch: San Diego, Denver, and Green Bay and Atlanta. And then the night game, I think we're looking at 3 very strong games to close out the Sunday afternoon slate. It's the lightest slate that we'll see all year. But a lot of intriguing things that I think are going to be going on in those games, a lot of playoff implications as a result of those games. So I'm eager to check those out. I do think that the Atlanta Falcons pose some interesting matchups. Their passing offense for the Green Bay Packers defense, particularly the secondary. I know we were big on trying to look at what Brian Hoyer was going to be able to do passing the football against this Packers secondary, and all of a sudden Brian Hoyer goes out. Now they actually have to face a real legitimate passing offense from the Atlanta Falcons. And a lot of this talk has been about the Green Bay run defense, but they've only really faced the Dallas Cowboys in terms of great run offense. And they gave up a ton of yardage to them. So I'm interested to see what the Packers run defense brings to the table against the Atlanta Falcons. And, of course, we've got this whole dynamic with Aaron Rodgers and the fact that they're throwing the ball a ton because they don't have Eddie Lacy back there. And what type of chess moves will the Atlanta Falcons try to do to take some of that away from them, with Aaron Rodgers attempting likely a large number of passes in this game yet again for another week. So there's a lot of interesting storylines there to try to predict what's going to happen. And, of course, the Philadelphia-Dallas game, really intriguing sort of parallels between both teams. Like, as I mentioned to you before, the Eagles were trying to almost like morph into what the Dallas Cowboys have been for the last couple of years. They just don't have the offensive line to do it, but they want to be this, as you mentioned earlier, this time of possession, ball control style offense, not really make Wentz go down the field, not really make him make a ton of reads, just get the ball out of his hands effectively and let guys do work either yards after the catch or on the ground and play solid defense behind them, getting your defense a lot of rest, especially compared to what Philadelphia's defense had last season. So that game is going to be really interesting because there's a number of parallels between both of those teams, as opposed to in years past where Philly was this up-tempo, run-and-gun type of style offense under Chip Kelly, and Dallas was the complete opposite. Now we've got two birds of a feather, so to speak, that are going to be going up against each other. Any quick, 30-second, 1-minute thought on either of those two games before we end this one and wish everybody good luck in Week 8?
No, I mean, not anything in particular, beyond what you said.
Yeah, it's going to be those two games I just think from football perspective, watching these games from a football perspective are going to be fascinating. I think anytime you've got some very good teams that match up well, I mean, there's a couple edges that I'm looking at in one of those games in particular, but I won't get into all those minutiae details here. But really, really intriguing matchups in this late slate of games. So with that said, Evan, any other words of wisdom that you have to impart on the listeners in terms of a play? I know we touched on a couple really good running backs. You talked a couple of those in parallel across the league on the smaller slate. You can give us like a name or two of a wide receiver that you think we maybe didn't touch on, but you really think he could be in a good spot this week, and then we'll shut her down for the week.
Yeah, we talked about a bunch of guys. We talked about Hilton. We talked about Mike Evans. We talked about Brandon Marshall a little bit. I really like Larry Fitzgerald against the Panthers. Larry Fitzgerald leads the NFL in targets inside the 10-yard line. That is the statistic that correlates most strongly with receiving touchdowns, for obvious reasons. It's a lot stronger than just red zone targets, which we talk about a lot. But, it's who is the OC calling plays to get the ball to in scoring position, who does the quarterback trust in the most critical situations? And, that's Larry Fitzgerald, again, for obvious reasons. And the Panthers slot corner is Robert McClain, a guy who Pro Football Focus has given a negative coverage grade in each of his last 4 games. He battled a hamstring injury before the Panthers' Week 7 bye, and he's 5'9", 195. Larry Fitzgerald is 6'3", 225. So just a really, really big mismatch. And then you look at the outside of the Cardinals receiver core. Michael Floyd doesn't look like he's going to play. Hamstring injury. Jerron Brown tore his ACL last week. They turned to J.J. Nelson, who I think is actually kind of an interesting dart throw this week. 4.28 speedster, had 7 targets last week, played 84% of the Cardinals snaps. He's got monster big play ability. And then John Brown, who missed last week with leg pain, and he was able to practice on a limited basis this week. I'm just not sure what to expect out of him on Sunday. Maybe he'll be fine. I don't know. I know that Larry Fitzgerald gets the ball out in scoring position, is the healthiest pass catcher for Carson Palmer right now, and the Panthers struggle in the secondary. So I think Larry Fitzgerald is a great bet for a touchdown this week.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Building on that point that you raised there, watching that game, that Seattle game where the Arizona Cardinals are very low scoring, one of the takeaways that I had obviously was the fact that, is very limited in terms of what Carson was trying to do to other players. It was really isolated to shorter passes to his de facto tight end, a.k.a. Larry Fitzgerald, and short passes to David Johnson, the running back. I mean, those two players occupied the vast, vast majority of the targets from Carson Palmer. It was a few shots down the field or a couple of targets to some other players. And one of the other interesting things that I remember doing last year in this very spot, Arizona versus Carolina in the playoffs, was David Johnson over the number of receptions. And I think that those types of things are really big here. It won easily, but David Johnson is just being targeted an awfully lot by Carson Palmer. I think that's only going to increase, as you mentioned. I mean, even if John Brown's back, a couple of deep shots to him or a couple of other targets to him, but for the most part, it's pretty much David Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald. And so that's a lot of equity if you're getting into PPR, any type of action for David Johnson through the air to supplement and complement what he's going to get on the ground. But Larry certainly looks like he's going to be the player that, if you're not talking about a running back, he's going to be targeted a ton based upon some of the limitations of this offense as it currently stands. I think that's an excellent possibility. With regard to that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap a bow around this one for Week 8. Thank you guys for checking us out. Hopefully you enjoyed the little segment with Bill Krackman and Krackomberger live from Las Vegas, and we'll try to get him on board later. If you guys have any follow-up questions or other things that you would like us to ask him, maybe we can later this season bring him on board to do another little segment. But for Evan and myself, thanks again for checking it out. You can definitely be sure to follow Evan on Twitter at Evan Silva. Check out all of his great work over at rotoworld.com. And you can check all my work out over at sharpfootballanalysis.com and sharpfootballstats.com, as well as follow me on Twitter at sharpfootball. Guys, enjoy Week 8. Good luck to you, and we will talk to you next week.
Wow.